Pastor, if you'd like to come forward, and everyone, if you so choose, please stand and remain standing for the pledge to our nation's flag.
Let us pray. Almighty and gracious God, in whom we live and move and have our being, we thank you for today, for an opportunity to be together. We pray that you would give this council and the leaders of our community the wisdom, insight, and guidance that they need to be a way in which people can grow and develop and learn even in the midst of this pandemic. We pray and ask that you would continue to work within our community, help us to see the way that you are bringing justice, equality, and peace in all that you do. All these things we pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge to our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Pastor. May we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Ames.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Philshaw.
Present.
Councilmember Neal.
Present.
Councilmember Getz.
Present.
Councilmember Pate. Councilmember Samuel. And Councilmember Mouton.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have one proclamation today, and it's my honor to deliver it. Whereas women are an integral part in the success of society, and whereas Pioneering Women is a grassroots organization founded to enhance the lives of women, and its mission is to motivate, educate, activate, and uplift women for the betterment of humankind. And whereas Saturday, August 1st, 2020 is Women's Suffrage Centennial Celebration Day, commemorating the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which guarantees women the right to vote, and showcasing the diversity and contributions of women from all interest, occupations, and livelihoods. And whereas accomplishing this milestone required a lengthy and difficult struggle, and this celebration helps us to reflect on this unprecedented achievement. Pioneering Women is dedicated to honoring the legacy of those past pioneers and spotlight the contributions of present-day pioneers in our community. And whereas in honor of this celebration, Pioneering Women plan to host the Rise of Women Luncheon on August 6, 2020, honoring the following women for their dedication and contributions to their professions and to their communities: Jane Ann Kimplay, Felicia Young, Gwendolyn Lacey, Kara Hawthorne, Lubna Elia, Gabriella Carungo, and Denise Wallace-Spooner. Out of abundance of caution due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have chosen to cancel our luncheon this year. We would still like to take this time today to honor these fantastic women and all women for everything they do to make their contributions a better place. And now, therefore, I, Becky Ames, Mayor of the City of Beaumont, do in honor and in recognition of all women in our community, and do hereby proclaim August 1st, 2020 as Women's Suffrage Centennial Celebration Day in Beaumont, and ask all citizens to join in and recognize the women of this community who have given of themselves for the betterment of society. Accordingly, I have set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Beaumont to be affixed. Signed today, Becky Ames, Mayor. And I believe let's see, Maureen Guillory, President of Pioneering Women. There you are. Hi, Maureen. Come on, please come forward. Wave at everyone, and feel free to say a few words. Okay.
Every year, you all grace us with the proclamation, and we truly, truly appreciate it. And as you know, for obvious reasons, we have to cancel the luncheon. We're hoping things get better later in the year, and we'll be able to do something. But most of all, I hope and pray that all of you stay well and please be safe.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you so much. Okay, that concludes our proclamations. So now is the time for if any citizen wishes to speak. If you would like to make public comment today on schedule item number 1 or the consent agenda, the time to do so is now. We will have a public hearing later on some other items, but right now it's for item number 1 or the consent agenda. If you would like to speak on one of these items and you haven't already done so, please fill out the green slip, hand it to the officer. She will give it to the city clerk. She will call out your name. We would appreciate if you keep your comments to 3 minutes. The green light will come on when you approach the podium, and the red light will come on when your time is up.
I don't have any, Mayor.
Okay, if there's no one, I failed to say, but I will open up the microphone at the end of the meeting for anyone that would like to speak on any other purpose. Council, is there a motion on the consent agenda, please?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. There's a motion for approval of the consent agenda. Is there any discussion?
Question, Mayor.
Yes, go ahead,
Thank
please.
you, Mayor. On C, talking about the House Bill 2826, and I guess this is for the attorney. Do we typically have contingent fee contracts?
Very seldom do we have contingency fee contracts. This just happens to be one of them. Most times when we engage attorneys, it's either hourly, primarily hourly.
So we're not even really expecting a response from the Attorney General on this then?
That was one of the exceptions, but we're thinking we're gonna send it off to him anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council? There's a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. First item, please.
Mayor and council, item number 1 is an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the city of Beaumont amending ordinance 20-020 to amend the public health emergency disaster orders for the city of Beaumont, opening certain city facilities, providing for severability, providing for a penalty, and providing for repeal. On June the 23rd, the city council amended the emergency disaster orders to allow for the opening of all previously closed city facilities on or before July the 31st, with the exception of the Lakeside Center. And council members Samuel and Mouton have requested that this item be placed on the agenda to reconsider the opening of certain facilities.
Okay, is there a motion on this item?
I so move that we do not open the facilities on or before the 31st.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so we're saying not till sometime after the 31st, are we just gonna leave it wide open?
We could revisit it in 2 weeks, every 2
Yes.
weeks?
That's like we do any disaster order. I would say we continue to monitor the progress or lack of progress that's being made, and we can adjust accordingly.
Okay. So would it be okay with everyone if we just say every 2 weeks we'll look at it and decide?
Does that mean you all are going to look at it at a public meeting, or staff?
I think we just bring it, I mean, I guess, I mean, that's up to y'all. I mean, y'all asked for it to be put on. I just think we need to have some kind of, something to monitor.
Some kind of
It's-
guideline?
I believe it would be appropriate that we evaluate it as we do the other orders that's in place, and just address it from that vantage point, looking at the progress that has been made or the lack of progress, whether it's getting better or getting worse, and we can make those adjustments based on that information that we receive.
Okay, Councilmember Mouton and Councilmember Getz.
Well, our public health director is here. I would love to get a comment
Okay,
from the public health director or a suggestion as to how we could move forward.
okay. Before we do, let's see what Councilmember Getz has, or would you rather wait?
No, I'd like to make a comment now.
Okay, go ahead.
A couple of weeks ago, when we considered this, one of the factors that we had in play here was that a lot of citizens had booked city facilities, the event center, for instance, for wedding receptions, that sort of thing. And then, and now, I still believe that we can open those facilities following appropriate CDC protocol. And guidelines for personal health, safety, and fitness. But I would like to hear from Emily, what is the current status of those reservations? Because we had told people we were not going to open until July 31st. Now, if we're going to amend that, I want to know how that's going to affect citizens' plans. Are there some citizens going to be less scrambling because they've anticipated something happening to open these facilities in August, and now we're going to pull the rug out from under them? I want to know what the situation is like for that before we vote on anything.
Okay, we can hear from both of those city staff members, but I will say, I wouldn't say we're pulling the rug out from under them. When we put this in place, we said that we would continue to monitor it based on the numbers. We had 87 new cases yesterday and many over the weekend, and last week was a bigger spike than we've ever seen. Anticipate even a bigger spike because of all the testing that we have going on. Just an FYI, if you haven't been following the numbers. If you'd like to come forward, Ms. Ulmer would like to hear from you, and then Ms. Wheeler. Okay, yes, please.
Just a point of clarification there. Are we going to identify which facilities we're talking about? Are we talking about all city facilities?
Well, the ones that are,
It's a long list.
I think it's the ones that are currently closed.
Well,
I was addressing those that had not been reopened at this time that were to be reopened by the 31st.
well, that would have been,
Event Center and
Vent, Civic, Julie.
we opened all of them that were closed at that time.
What's that? Say that again, please.
On the 23rd, we opened all that had been closed at that time, which included the downtown library, event center,
No, we didn't.
not the Lakeside Center.
Thank you.
So that was everything.
No, there's still
No, that's not what happened.
right.
Not a
Civic Center, the Event Center, the Julie Rogers Theater, the Jefferson Theater, Lakeside Center, Sterling Pruitt Center, community centers, except for special, we're about to do something with the Census Bureau. So the ones I just named are still closed as of today.
Through the
But
31st.
they were scheduled to be open on the 31st.
That's correct.
All right,
Yeah,
after the
that's what I'm saying.
31st. Mhm.
Yeah, all those that were previously closed were scheduled to be open on the 31st, or by the
That's correct.
31st.
Or the 1st, I think it was closed
Except-
through the 31st.
Except for the Lakeside Center.
Except
Right.
for the Lakeside Center.
Okay, Ms. Ulmer, if you'd like to go ahead and come forward, then we can talk about those different entities.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. As of yesterday, we have a total of 2,237 confirmed cases of COVID. And what we're noticing is that our cases are constantly increasing. So we have not reached a level where we have plateaued. Those numbers continue to increase at a significant rate. So with that, we have noticed since Memorial Day, where our numbers took a U-turn, and those numbers constantly are increasing. We are also concerned about our hospitalizations. Both of our hospitals have more than the required numbers of beds that has been ordered by the governor that they would reserve for COVID-19 patients. And each one of them has had recently, each one of them have had a significant number of patients on ventilators. So, though the ventilators have not exceeded the numbers that they are required, that they can have, we have an adequate number of ventilators, and we have an available number of beds. However, it takes staff that's trained to take care of these critical patients that the hospitals are struggling with, because there's also other things that's happening. People are still coming in with heart attacks. There's still car accidents. So we are at a point where we are extremely concerned about our healthcare system and how they can continue to provide the needed care for these critical patients.
And just a question real quick.
Yes.
Is it correct, I'd heard that one of the hospitals had asked the state or whomever they go to for a nurse strike team,
That's exactly right.
and our EMS has asked the state for additional EMS because they're also taxed.
Exactly right.
Okay.
So we have those two things working. We also know that one of our hospitals has requested a mobile medical unit, which would provide available beds outside of the hospital in a a medical unit that would be set up outside of the hospital. So we are at a critical point with the numbers of patients, critical care patients, that the hospitals can care for. It is taxing our whole healthcare system from EMS to nurses. So that's our biggest concern. In the meantime, we're looking at school restarting at some level. We're also looking at flu season just around the corner, which in August we usually start planning for flu season, getting flu shots in, and offering those to our citizens. So we are at a extremely critical time for our hospitals and the care that they can continue to provide at this time.
Councilman Pate, did you have a question for Ms. Elmer?
Yes. What day did we start counting COVID patients?
12th of March.
March 12th, yes.
And since that time, the grand total is what now?
It's 2,237 as of yesterday.
Okay.
There'll be more today.
Okay. Now, doesn't COVID usually last about 14 days? Okay.
Usually.
Are we deducting those who have recovered from that grand total? Or is that grand total just keep adding on?
Yes,
I want to clarify it for our citizens out here.
Yes, that's the total number. A lot of those people have recovered.
So
yes.
We might have 2,900 since March, but 1,900 of them could have recovered.
Well, that's on the report, how many recovered.
Yeah, I know, but not everybody's going to read the report. I'm trying to clarify it for our citizens.
Right, that's right. You're right.
Because when they hear 2,900, they think there's 2,900 cases right now.
Yeah, no.
When there might be 1,000 cases, all of which came over the last month.
That's exactly right.
And there's so much that not just what we do, but what they see on TV that is sometimes confusing, because as I understand it, you correct me, COVID also includes influenza and pneumonia in the total of all the data that I've seen on the national level. It includes COVID, it includes influenza, and it includes pneumonia.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
On the national level.
It will include pneumonia. Some people who get pneumonia is as a result of having COVID, but I'm not familiar with influenza.
And I'm pulling that right off the CDC, and I know there's so much stuff. People don't realize how hard she works to do what she does, and that's why I'm trying to kind of clarify it, because when you see a big old number out there, you think, that's how many people still have it?
Yes.
When in reality, the ones in March, by April, they were back home doing whatever they were doing.
Some of them, yes.
Yeah.
But we also, we are publishing those new numbers every day.
Mm-hmm.
So the new numbers far outweigh those that have recovered because we have more testing, and of course we're going to have more numbers, but those persons would be positive anyway if we didn't test them, and they're going to be infecting other people. So when we look at 87 cases that we had yesterday, we can probably multiply that by 10. on an average. And that's how many more people who have not been tested that we don't know what their status is that are probably positive. So, and that's a CDC research that there are at least 10 more people that are positive.
I guess to add to that too, in March, in April mostly, our cases were running in the 20s. I mean, when we'd have 25, it was a lot.
That's right.
I mean, and even into May somewhat.
Yes.
It didn't really start getting into the high numbers until recently. So to think that that even half of that total numbers recovered is incorrect, because that's not the case, because
Yes.
we didn't. Now, I'm not saying there weren't people walking around out there with COVID that we didn't know about, and there are now too, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But if you go all the way back to March, you can't compare where we are now to where we were in March, March 12th, when we started counting, because our positives were really, I mean, it was typical to have a 4 or a 5 positive day.
10 was a big day.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 was a big day.
Just a FYI.
Yeah, well, I FYI every day on this stuff, just like I know you do and Sherry does.
Yes.
The question that I have is, how many more tests are we doing today? Just so everybody can put it in perspective, because you look at this all the time. The
Yes.
mayor looks at it, we look at it.
Yes.
But the average person doesn't know. If we were doing 200 tests in March a day, and now we're doing 2,000, well, it makes sense it's going to go up. But they don't have that, to evaluate and put it in perspective. There ain't any question it's a serious situation.
Sure.
But we want to make sure that they understand we're comparing apples and apples, because when we're testing 200 and we get 25, and the death rate in the United States is down to what it was in March, which sadly, 1 death's too many. But if it was 200 in March, and then we look today and see what it is, by comparison, the high point was 2,000. And I think that was sometime in May. But
Yeah.
it's dropped significantly in spite of all the testing. I just want to make sure that our citizens, if they're watching us and we're talking to them about Beaumont, that they understand how we're doing it in Beaumont, because when they turn on their television set, there's so many numbers they're throwing at them that they're thinking, I can't even go into my own bathroom, I might catch it. And that ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
But we want them to know what the facts are and let them make up their own mind as far as putting it in perspective.
Sure.
And can you give us just an idea?
So our dilemma is, we don't get the total number of negatives. Those are not required to be reported to us. It's the positives that are required to be reported to us. When we have our military testing team come in, we get those negatives. So we have 6,000 maybe in our database, and all of that is entered. From the private companies that are doing the testing, we don't get those negatives. We only get the positives. But what we know, when we look at this, we know that COVID is in every zip code across Beaumont. We want people to be careful and not try to think about, oh, well, this is a small percentage. We've had 34 deaths. And recently, there was a period of time when we had no deaths. And there was a period of time when we were talking to the nurses, the infection control nurses in the hospitals. They were seeing that people who were coming in and being hospitalized with COVID had a less serious infection, and their hospital stay was less. That lasted maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. It has gone back to people are on ventilators and on ventilators for a very long time, and a lot of them are dying. So you've noticed that if you look at the numbers, there was a period of time we had no deaths. Now we're having deaths again. So what I want, the message that we're constantly trying to get out to the public is, number one, avoid large crowds. We know that that will help. We know that when we had the stay-at-home order prior to Memorial Day, our numbers started to plateau and they started to come down. And then at Memorial Day, when things partially opened, we think everybody heard open. And so that was an opportunity. Oh, I've been locked up for a while. That was an opportunity for them to get out. We saw our numbers take a U-turn, and they have skyrocketed since then. So we want the public to understand, we want our community to understand, avoid large crowds. Stay home if you're sick. Wear masks while you're in public. Wash your hands and practice social distancing. We know that those tried and true public health techniques work, because at this point, we have some experimental treatment, but we really don't have anything that we can sink our teeth into that is helping people, especially those that are having a serious infection. It's not helping those people survive this. And we've seen, because we talk to them, we don't take care of any of these patients, but we talk to them. We have young people, 38 years old, who have been on ventilators for 8 weeks. They've thrown clots, they've had strokes, they've had to have amputations. They survived, but they're facing life-changing challenges. And so this is serious. We know very little about the virus, and every day something changes. And so we just want people to weigh the risk. Is it worth it to go out into large crowds? Is it worth it to go out without wearing a mask? Do you have someone at home that you could bring the virus to who could end up with a very serious or life-threatening infection? So that's where we are. That's our concern as public health.
One last comment, Mayor.
And then Councilman Samuel, I believe has the floor.
I want you to know, because you know this and you've heard me say it, the first death was a longtime friend of mine. I take this really personally. Not
Yes.
everybody knows somebody that's got it. Not everybody knows somebody that passed away, and even smaller number knew the first one that passed away.
Yes.
An individual that I'd known and been close friends with for decades.
Yes.
So that's how, and you know this, but that's how serious I am about it. But I also want our citizens to understand that we're always comparing apples and apples, and so that they don't get confused. There is so much stuff thrown at them out there in the news that it's easy to be confused.
Yes.
As Beaumont's different than New York City, but that they'll hear more about New York and Los Angeles and Chicago and Baltimore than they do Beaumont. The ones that are watching us today is a real small number compared to the people going to turn in to Channel 6, Channel 12, Channel 4 this afternoon, or whatever else they watch,
Yes.
and see these huge numbers. And we just want to know that we're doing everything we can to keep everybody safe in Beaumont, because we care about you.
Yes.
But it's not the same as 50,000 people dying in New York. And that's which, because of some of the things they did that they should have done, some of the stuff we did, and they would have had that issue. That's it, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Samuel.
Ms. Omar, where's Texas ranked now?
I don't know.
Of recent, it was like second or third
Yes, very
with the
high.
number of cases.
Yes.
And New York was not above Texas,
Yeah.
correct? How much of a factor is lack of understanding? How big a factor is that with the citizenry out there?
Yeah, I think there is a serious lack of understanding. And so, you know, we also take it personal as public health officials to get the message out there in a way that people will understand it. I think that, again, I think that when things partially opened, that people just heard open, and there were big crowds everywhere, and all public health officials were like, oh my God, we're looking at the pictures and we're thinking in 2 weeks we're going to see an increase in COVID, and in 2 weeks we did. and that increase has not gone down yet. So we want, we're constantly trying to be out in front of it and saying, this is what you need to do. This has not yet gone away. Just because some things are open doesn't mean that you can partake in those things. You don't have to go because they're open, because the virus is still out there. And this is truly, I think, a test of our humanity at this point. What are we going to do to protect those people who really don't understand how to protect themselves? So we do have to be constantly giving the message out.
Do you think the average school-age person understands?
Absolutely not.
What about those individuals who are not as briefed on the situation?
Yes, absolutely not.
Or those who don't understand the statistics?
That's right.
Is it a fact that there's, in the minority community, it's about 44%, whereas in the non-minority community is about 20-something?
That's absolutely right. Yes.
So it would be correct in that this is adversely impacting the minority community in greater proportions than it is the majority community.
Absolutely.
And we've seen these daily records continue to go up, regardless of what the statistics are showing, whether it's as a related to COVID, but we're seeing deaths go up.
Yes.
We're seeing cases, the number of cases exploding.
Exactly.
Now, can you tell me what would we be doing that's in the best interest of the citizens of Beaumont to open non-essential services at this time? Why would that be of best interest to the citizens of Beaumont, to open facilities to have parties or wedding events or any event that brings numbers to that?
Yes.
Is there a benefit to our citizens to do that now?
Again, Council Member, I think that when our citizens hear open, even if it's partially open, they don't really hear or understand partial. And they're looking to us to make the best decisions for them. When they hear open, they think that the pandemic is gone, that there's not a chance of them getting the pandemic because it no longer exists. So I do think that they look to us as officials to make the right decisions. There is no benefit to them to go to a party. Avoiding large crowds is one of those techniques that we know will work to decrease the spread of the virus.
And with that, has there been a confusion? Is there a confusion now from the messages that's being given from Washington, D.C., or from Austin, Texas, or from Jefferson County Courthouse, or even City Hall?
Yes.
If all of these messages are different, does that create confusion?
Oh, absolutely.
And do you feel, have you seen that's what's happening across this nation now?
I feel confused myself about some things, yes.
So if this is not, if we're not talking about essential services, we're talking about just our facilities to allow individuals to have group settings. In your opinion, as a healthcare professional, would that be good or would that be adverse to the majority of our citizens in our city?
Sure. If it is not a function where you can practice social distancing, I think that would be a disadvantage.
Okay, is that all, please? Is that all, Councilman?
Yes.
Okay, Councilman Felshaw, Getz, and Mouton. I'm going to you, because you already talked, right? Or you had questions for her? You asked to speak to her. And you haven't asked her any
Yeah.
questions. Okay, go ahead, Councilman Mouton, and then I'll go to this. Okay,
Thank you, Mayor.
sorry about that.
Ms. Homer, being that you are the health director for our city, you stated that our hospitals are at maximum capacity. Could you explain to the public, and you made some statements to the fact that there are not enough healthcare providers that are trained to administer care to people that are that critical.
Yes.
But could you go into a little more detail as to where we are with being at maximum capacity for our local hospitals at this point?
So when we are at that type of capacity, we have so many critically ill patients that the hospitals are finding it difficult to care for those patients, as well as the other patients in the hospital. When we have to reach out for assistance, then we are at a position, and to reinforce, the CEOs of the 3 major hospitals in this area put out a letter a few weeks ago asking the public to follow these guidelines, avoid large crowds, only make essential trips, essential being to the grocery store and to the doctor's offices. Those are, they avoid large crowds, wash your hands, wear face coverings. So I've never seen that the 3 hospitals, their CEOs got together and put together a letter to ask the public to help them so that they can better provide care to all the patients coming into the hospital.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Ms. Omar, I don't believe there's anybody on this council. Well, let me say it this way. I believe everyone on this council is concerned about the health and well-being of our citizens.
Yes.
Not only our citizens, but our families.
Sure.
And we're all trying to find a way to move forward in a safe and responsible manner. The first order that came down, I believe, from the county judge was on Friday, March the 13th. That Sunday, the 15th, you were a part of a panel that I had as we were beginning to discuss about the COVID-19.
Yes.
We knew less then than we do now. And the problem with this is we're in a pandemic that we've never dealt with before.
That's right.
So I don't know that there is, as far as I'm concerned, you're the expert in the room. And yet I know that you have so many questions still unanswered, and we're learning each day as we go along.
That's correct.
And so there's a lot of contradictions out there right now. There are some things that we think are fact, some things are fiction, some things are perception, some things are reality. And we as citizens are trying to navigate through this and try to understand, do you wear a mask, do you not wear a mask? It's just every day we're bombarded with all this information.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to move forward, as I said, in a way that is safe and responsible and consider the health and the well-being of our citizens.
Mm-hmm.
But we also know that beyond the physical, there's the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual well-being.
Mm-hmm.
We also know that we have to get our economy moving.
Mm-hmm.
If we go into the spring of next year where we are today, our economy is going to be in serious trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to find a way forward. And there are contradictions, as I mentioned.
Absolutely.
Home Depot, Lowe's, restaurants are open. Some places are closed, some places aren't.
Right.
And so would you agree that ultimately, we do need to, as leaders, we have a responsibility, we do, but ultimately it falls on the individual taking personal responsibility for themselves and for those around them. And we all have to do our part in trying to get through this pandemic and this crisis. But I am concerned as a council member for my citizens and for my parishioners and for my family members.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also concerned about the people under my influence, that they're losing their jobs, businesses on the verge of collapsing.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's beyond just the physical part of it, but it's the emotional, the spiritual, the financial well-being of our community. And so it does boil down to individual personal responsibility, because we can make all the rules in the world, but ultimately each person has to decide that I'm going to follow the guidelines.
You know, Councilmember Felshaw, I do agree with that. But I also know that there are people who are going to misinterpret if we're not very clear. And that's just the way it is. I've been in nursing a long, long time, and I wish everybody would assume personal responsibility. But I do believe that at some point, we have to make a very clear, give very clear directions, because if you leave it open, then it can be misinterpreted. So my major goal as a public health official is to see these numbers decrease. And I believe that we should take the steps necessary to see these numbers decrease. We were seeing them decreased when everything was closed. Do I think we need to close everything? That's not a decision that I have to make. But I do think that there should be some limitation of movement so that we can see this virus decrease. I want to share with you something that I heard a physician say. This virus is a non-thinking parasite, but it is doing what it has been designed to do. We, the humans, the thinking humans, should be able to do what we need to do so that we can see this virus decrease. The virus needs a host, and that's what it's looking for. It's looking for a host so that it can multiply. We should be able to do the things that we need to do to see this transmission of the virus decrease. And so it truly is a test of our humanity. Are we going to try to help those people who really don't understand and can't help themselves?
Well, thank you for all that you're doing, because I do know as a community and a nation, we're trying to understand how do we live with this, let's say until next May. I know they're talking about a vaccine the first of the year, but we don't know for sure.
Yes.
And even then, we're not sure, is it going to hit Beaumont? How quickly will they be able to reproduce this and get it to us? But we as a community are trying to understand, how do we live with the COVID-19 until the spring of the year perhaps, and hopefully it will be over then. But we've got a road ahead of us.
We do.
And I think that's what we're all trying to figure out. How do we stay alive as a community and live with the COVID-19 until we can beat this thing? So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Getz.
I think I'd like to hear from Ms. Wheeler before I make further comment.
I'm sorry, say it again?
I would like to hear from Ms. Wheeler before I make further comment.
Okay, let me just, before you sit down then, before you sit down, I want to make sure nobody else has any questions for you, but I just had, as you know, I mean, you talk to the hospitals every day. And, you know, I agree that we have to do something to move our economy, but the quicker we get rid of this or try to get this to be stabilized, then the quicker we can get back on track. And I, for one, am not one that gets, I'm not afraid, but I also have to listen to the people who I think are dealing with it on the front lines. And I have talked, as you have, because we do that every day through the EOC, talk with the hospitals to see the condition they're in. And I mean, there was one day that there were 20 people on vents at both hospitals each.
Right, exactly.
And that is not something that we have seen before. And coming from that industry, a lot of times when you went on a vent, that's pretty bad. Sometimes you're not going to come off the vent.
That's right.
And that's why we keep asking for the plasma, because that will help. So I will say one more time, anybody that's out there that has had COVID or tested positive and got well, please.
Or lived in the house with someone with
Or
COVID.
lived in, that you may have the antibodies to go and do this, because this will get it behind us quicker also.
Yes.
So, but I can't, there's not one physician that I've talked to that has said you need to open everything back up. I mean, they're not one that, I mean, they call. I mean, they call, they're almost sounding a little I don't want to say desperate because they're not.
They are desperate. Yeah, they are desperate.
But for us to make sure that we get past this and do everything that we can to get past it, and the hospitals. And that's what's the scariest thing to me is the hospitals, because if you have something happen that's an emergency, non-COVID related, we want to make sure that they can be taken care of too.
Absolutely. And one of our hospitals now is on diversion.
Yeah.
We're not taking.
And they've been on diversion on and off for the last few weeks.
For the last few
both
weeks,
of them. Yeah.
exactly.
Is there anything else you want to say about the hospitals or,
I
okay,
think that's it.
okay. All right, thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Sherry.
While Emily's coming forward, pass out this information.
Okay, thank you.
This is what's booked at various facilities at this time.
Okay.
And Mayor, while he's doing that, are these the dates, can I ask, these are the dates? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's got every date on it and everything.
Well, what was the date that we actually closed all our facilities? Do we remember that offhand?
We started counting COVID March 12th, but I think we closed them a little before that.
I think it was a week later, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so maybe.
The 18th sounds
yeah.
right, but do you
Sounds about
recall?
It was a March 16th.
Okay. That was the day of the first order.
You declared the disaster declaration on March 16th,
Okay, so,
and it was amended on the 19th.
so that would have been, yeah, okay.
So we have no way of knowing, I know that, but.
Well, the 16th.
I mean,
Let me finish. I'm sorry. We have no way of knowing, but my point, we have no way of knowing, had we not closed, if it would have impacted the numbers, negative or positive. The fact is, we've been closed and the numbers are still going up.
True. Yeah, you want to let her talk first, or you want to ask her
Oh,
questions?
sure, go ahead if you have some comments.
Oh,
Do you
no,
have
I don't.
comments?
Go ahead.
Okay, all right.
Okay. So, thank you, Mr. Manager, for providing us with this list of events. It's broken into 4 categories: the Julie Rogers Theater, the Beaumont Civic Center, the Event Center, 5 categories: the Jefferson Theater, and the Tevis Meeting Room. Ms. Wheeler, if we were to open right now, do you anticipate any of those events that the Julie Rogers booked in August and September would actually go forward?
At this time, they're scheduled to go forward.
Okay, you have not heard from any of the organizations like the
Symphony we have.
We talk to them all the time, but at this time, they're planning to go forward.
Okay, so they are planning to go forward. All right. And the Civic Center, things like LIT, Salute to Real American Heroes, and the Texas Energy Museum Blowout, Westbrook Homecoming Dance. I mean, I understand that, for instance, schools going to be meeting virtually at BISD for now the first 8 weeks. So isn't it reasonable to conclude they're not going to be able to have a homecoming dance?
It's highly possible. We reach out to all these clients regularly, and if they haven't confirmed a cancellation and requested a reschedule or a refund, we have them on our schedule.
Okay. And all of these weddings ceremonies that are booked in August and September to the event center, or these are all still on as we talk today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, you know, I appreciate Ms. Ulmer's comments, but let's be clear what we're talking about here. We're saying it's okay to go to HEB, but it's not okay to book one of the community meeting rooms to have a neighborhood meeting. It's okay to go to church, but it's not okay to attend a wedding reception at the event center. All of these facilities have been closed since March, but the numbers have gone up anyway. So is it really helping by keeping these facilities closed? I don't know the answer to that. Nobody knows the answer to that, because all of this involves a high degree of speculation. We can listen to the science, and of course we can all agree that it is important to socially distance. It is important to wear masks around other people. It is important to take care of yourself. But there comes, in my view, a measure of personal responsibility. And I guess that's where I diverge from one of the comments that Ms. Ulmer said. She said that people look to us to make the best decisions for them. I disagree with that. I think that people need to take personal responsibility and think about what is in their best interest and allow them the freedom to make those decisions, not to have the government make those decisions for them, but to let individuals make those decisions. The First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to peacefully assemble. We seem to be, to some extent, picking winners and losers. It's okay to assemble in the park, even if you're not socially distancing from one another. But we can't assemble in a taxpayer-funded government building. I think that the time has come that we give consideration to where we were 2 weeks ago to go ahead and open these facilities back up. And I continue to support that and have people make wise decisions, to not live in fear, but to make wise choices. I've said that from the very beginning. I'm going to continue to say that. Do not live in fear, but make wise choices. If you have a compromised immune system, you shouldn't go where there's a lot of people. If you're of a certain age, you shouldn't go where there's a lot of people. If you think that you are at risk, you should not go where there is a lot of people. That's all I have to say about it.
So no more questions for, does anybody else have questions for Ms. Wheeler? Because I don't want to have her stand up there, well, because she's not going to make the decision, obviously.
No. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Councilmember, and then Councilmember Pate. Councilmember Mouton.
Ms. Wheeler, okay, I'm looking at the weddings, and most of the weddings are $250, $175, $200. Is there any way the event center could be set up to social distance for 200 and 250 people?
What you're seeing on this list is what these individuals proposed would be their attendance when they originally signed their contract.
Okay.
Based on the current governor's orders, our venue could open at 50% capacity, which is 175 guests. So we've made our clients aware of that, and will have to shift their attendance levels. They're also aware that it could change daily, and that those numbers could go up or down based on the governor's
Regardless
orders.
whether we open these or not, they have to follow
Correct.
the governor's orders, I think is.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes.
But following the governor's orders, is the capacity of the event center available to do social distancing at the event center?
For half of what?
For half of what the CDC and the governor and the government is requiring?
Well, we can set it up the way that the governor is proposing it be set up, with certain numbers of people at tables. We can put the tables so many feet apart, but we really can't police if individuals choose to gather at a wedding. But we can set up the venue based on the capacity levels and the distancing levels that have been proposed by the governor.
I mean, some of these people have probably booked these weddings 2 years in advance.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a day that, I mean, they've dreamed about, they've wanted for so long. Nobody want to crush anyone's dreams or events, but in the event, taking the responsibility to leave someone else to be responsible for my health. If I were to be at one of these events, and hoping that they would do what they're supposed to do, and in the event if they don't, then I get sick. I bring it and other people get sick. So it's just a situation that we're in, and just, I mean, we want to make the best decision possible, because see, Westbrook High School homecoming dance, that's 1,200 people. And one is Texas Energy Museum blowout. That's 1,500 people.
Well, and at the current guidelines, they wouldn't be able to have that
Right.
number of people. So, for instance, the homecoming dance would have to, if they chose to move forward, would have a reduced capacity, and I guess have to choose who could go and who couldn't.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be just half of what they put on their contract, it would be half of what the facility can hold.
Can hold.
Once we implement social distancing
Right,
guidelines.
exactly. Just want to make that, it's not just half of what.
No,
Yeah.
no, ma'am.
Is that all, Councilmember?
That's it.
Councilmember Pate, did you have something from Ms. Wheeler?
Well, I wanted to follow up. If we social distance and use these masks, which is what the guidelines are, and we tell them these same people walk into the restaurants every day wearing these till you get to the table, and that's part of the program. You know, you got to wear your mask if you walk into any restaurant till you get to your table. You're allowed to sit with your family members or whoever your group is, and and so it appears to me that if we follow the guidelines that the governor is giving us, and let's look down the road, this isn't a static situation. Literally, the governor, we're talking about something a month and a half away. In 2 weeks, the governor could say, we're going to open it up to 75%. I don't know. He's already said it doesn't appear there's going to be any chance of a lockdown, and he's going to do everything he can to make sure that doesn't happen while they're initiating all these things. But if we followed the governor's guidelines for these facilities, you can get 175 people in the event center, following at 50%, 550 in or 500 in the Julie Rogers. What's
that
the
half
number
capacity?
There's different guidelines for theaters.
You have to skip a row.
You have to
and
skip a row and
seats.
close off 2 seats between each individual party.
You
So-
have to-
Could you give me an idea?
I can. You know, best case scenario for capacity at the Julie Rogers Theater is that everybody comes in pairs.
Yeah,
But
pair up and walk into.
if that doesn't happen, then, you know, what we're looking at, maximum capacity there on a regular day is 1,651. And again, best case scenario, 50% occupancy is what we're at right now. You have to close off every other row and then the 2 seats. Best case, we're at 437.
Okay,
And the symphony knows that.
They do.
right. How many people routinely come to the symphony on an average night? I mean, I know it depends on whether it's a special program, because we've been there when it was full.
Right.
But,
About 1,100.
okay, about 1,100. And we could have how many at the
4.
symphony currently if we followed today's guidelines, not August or September's guidelines, because we don't know what those are.
Well, depending on what's now being called a fan pod, groups of people at an event that know each other, then about 437, best case scenario, and then just down from there.
Do you have an idea what the average attendance is routinely at the symphony?
1,100.
1,100, she said.
1,100 out of the 1,600.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions for Ms. Wheeler? Okay. I did.
Thank
I-
you.
I don't remember. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim.
I just think there is a difference, though, between restaurants, because the order puts the burden on the restaurant to maintain the goal or maintain the order that the governor puts forward. My biggest concern, and I've talked with Ms. Wheeler about this more than once, is how, I mean, our staff can't be responsible to monitor that. The people who are doing the event we would have to depend on them to monitor that. we could set it up the way it's supposed to be set up and make the requirements the way they're supposed to be, but we can't go in and police, right? We talked about that. We can't go in and police that. Restaurants are charged by the order to do what they're told to do, the management or the owners of the restaurant. Just to, as you were talking about the restaurant, that came to my mind.
Well, would it be fair to assume that we could tell, look, if we set this up at some point, whenever we decide we're going to do it, if you violate this, if it's violated, you can never come back here. I mean, you violated our rules, which, and I'll turn to Tyrone on this. If we laid out some rules prior to this and somebody violated the rules, couldn't we tell them you can't come back because you violated the rules? Isn't that part of our agreement? Before we ever did this?
First, you got to recognize it's a city facility.
Yeah.
And it's Emily and her staff's responsibility to maintain that facility in whatever rules they establish, whatever policies they have in place, pre-pandemic and pandemic. If we were to follow the governor's orders at the 50%, the proper spacing, it would be incumbent upon her and her staff to keep that in place throughout the evening.
Mm-hmm.
So for all intents and purposes, we become the enforcers.
Is that possible?
But we could tell them, my question was, Tyrone, if we tell them if you violate this is the last time you'll be able to use the facility, and they know it going in, that would seem any kind of agreement with any kind of facility, whether we have it or some other private facility somebody else has got, said if you come in and you violate our rules, you can't come back. I mean, that's pretty standard operating procedure.
That's standard.
Okay, just check.
So can I ask Emily though, real quick, do you mind if I call her back just for a second? So with that said, and I didn't think we would have to police it, but what are you hearing? I know you have conversations with other facilities in other cities, et cetera, et cetera. If they're doing this, how are they doing it? And would we have the staff would we be able to do it?
So right now, most city-owned venues are not open in the state of Texas. So I can't give you an answer on what they're doing besides that they're not open.
Okay.
But what I can tell you about, a publicly owned facility that's also following these guidelines is that they are policing it down to each guideline. And so we haven't really discussed this, but there are other guidelines that have been set forth by the governor related to venues, related to theaters, about temperature checks of all vendors that come in the building, health monitoring. So I mean, we're getting into is the staff also going to be taking on that responsibility of screening caterers, bands?
Well, that's a good point. We need to
So,
know that
I mean,
Thank
if
you.
we're going to talk about it, I think we should be realistic and not pick and choose which parts of the guidelines we're going to enforce if now the staff is going to be responsible to do so. So
Understand.
I just
they're
want to put
saying
that out there.
The
that
governor's order says temperatures and just give us an overview of what the order said. If we were to open these venues, what y'all would have to do?
See if I
And
can
if
pull
you're,
it up
as
real
long
quick.
as you're following the
But
governor's
does it say
orders.
that the city has to monitor that?
It says
Well,
the
who else
venue
would?
does.
The venue would be
But
us.
we could make that the responsibility of the person that's leasing the facility.
You can't,
That's
not
what
if
you-
it's a city
It's a
facility.
venue, though. It's a city
It's our venue.
Just like the restaurants have to do theirs. I didn't realize that.
So again, these are guidelines, but I'm trying to find the exact page. I don't know if you have a copy of it. Yeah. So
you don't know of any other facilities that are open in Texas, like the Julie or any of those type facilities that you're aware of?
there's a group that I'm a member of, and it's the, and I'm trying to find the list. There's a group I'm a member of, and they're all Texas, it's a group of Texas city-owned venues. And right now, none of them are functioning with events.
When do
It does not encompass every city-owned building, in the state, but it's a pretty good group.
Yeah.
When have they talked about when they anticipate they might start doing that?
I think that they're kind of taking it every couple of weeks like we are. I've heard a couple say mid-September, but again, everyone is fluid. right now. So, but there are privately owned venues that are open in our city and across the country. So, I'm happy to do whatever y'all want to do. I just don't want to only follow some of the guidelines and
Right.
not the others before we.
Can she finish, just if you'll tell us what you would have to do, and then I'll call Councilman Samuel.
There's several guidelines on dining, not leaving, condiments and flatware and things like that out. No tables of more than 10 people. Hand sanitizing stations, which we have. Groups must maintain at least 6 feet of social distancing. Screen employees and contractors before coming into the venue. What else? And obviously the health
Like
screening,
hangers and
asking
bands, and, yeah, okay.
asking people if they've had symptoms before they enter the building. There's quite a, it's
Okay, it's long.
but it's not impossible. It's just we need to determine which parts we want to, and are we going to police that or just put it on the client?
Councilman Samuel?
Yes. On the events at the various facilities, about how many staff people would we look at having on?
It depends on the venue, depends on the event.
Let's say the venues at the Civic Event Center for weddings, say up to whatever the capacity would be for that type of venue.
So on a normal day at the event center, we would have, 3 staff members and a manager.
Civic Center?
It depends on the event, but anywhere from 6 to 8.
So it's,
But we've increased that for COVID because we have increased the number of times we disinfect, the number of times we clean a restroom, and if we need to, enforce any of these guidelines, we would use additional staff to do that.
so what would be the venue that would require the most associated staff?
If we were doing an event inside the Julie Rogers Theater and we were going to implement 2 empty seats per, and we would need to enforce that, I would probably need 12 people as opposed to 4.
Okay.
But if we, if we're not responsible for it, then we would just have the 4 to 6 people that we would normally have at the theater. If we are
But
full,
since we are responsible for additional,
if that,
so that would be city employees?
yes, they're all going to need increased staffing if we take on additional responsibilities. We have it worked out to clean and disinfect more often with roughly the same staff, maybe 1 or 2 more people, depending on the event.
But you're continuously doing that now.
Oh, absolutely.
So there would be exposure
Council-
to those individual
Yeah.
employees also?
It's possible.
Good point. Councilmember Pate and then Councilmember Getz.
Emily, do you know of any organization that provides the service? Because one thing I discovered a long time ago, if there's a need, somebody's going to go in business doing it, whether it's to come in and do screening, and perhaps Sherry may know this, that would actually come in and say, we'll screen for all these events. Here's how much it's going to cost us. And do you know of anybody that's currently doing that now? Because usually when something like this happens, somebody comes along and says, look, we have the healthcare professionals, we can do it for you, and it's going to cost this much. How many people are going to be here? We're going to charge you for everyone with whom we're coming in contact to take their temperature. If they're not doing it now, I will guarantee you there'll be people that'll start doing it because, number one, that's how capitalism works. Number 2, it would be something, once that happens, that we would simply charge whoever is leasing the facility. It's going to cost $500 to have somebody come in here and do this. You need to know this coming up front. That's part of what we have to do, and the city's not going to absorb it. But I'd be on the lookout for that because something tells me somebody somewhere is putting that together if they hadn't already done it. And until today, we hadn't really talked about it, but there's a lot of really smart people out there that are in the healthcare facility profession that have nurses, and they go, this is what it's gonna cost, and we've got all of the facilities to do it. Whether it's at the Julie Rogers or the Event Center or the Civic Center. I mean, you walk in the outpatient center over at Christus, first thing they do is they're taking your temperature and asking if you've been to Spain lately, or China, or any place else for that matter.
Councilmember Getz, you have something for Mrs. Wheeler?
No, this isn't for you, but
Okay, you can, okay. If nobody else has anything, I didn't mean to, I don't want her to have to stand up there all day.
Certainly.
As we preach to her.
I don't mean to be preaching to anybody.
No, you don't. I don't mean that like that, but it's not fair to her.
So we're now talking about enforcement and what we can and can't do and what we should and shouldn't do and who would be responsible. And, you know, we clearly can enforce the number of people that walk into a facility. We have fire marshals do that all the time. So we can enforce the capacity numbers. We do that. It becomes more difficult to enforce some of the governor's orders, and the governor will tell you that because there's no penalty attached to disobedience of the governor's orders. So when you don't have a penalty attached, trying to enforce something is impossible. It becomes aspirational, not mandatory, because if somebody says, I'm not going to wear that mask, what are you going to do? We know we're not going to arrest them. Governor Abbott has said that. We're not going to put them in jail. You know, we're trying to keep the jails as lowly populated as we can. Are we going to issue a fine? You know, so we can allocate the responsibilities of enforcement from the city to the party that is booking the facility by contract. We can tell them that is their responsibility to enforce these orders amongst their group of people that they have invited to attend this event. And they know that going in. And it still becomes a matter of their decision. Well, yes, I want to go forward knowing all of these rules are now in play, or no, I don't. I think that's just a little bit much. We're going to put it off for 6 months. And as to what Councilmember Page just said, again, having temperature checks at the front door, great, we should do that. But we can allocate that to the party that wants to book the facility and say that also, that too, is part of your responsibility. I think we're making a great big deal about something that is not likely to transpire too much, because once most people see what they're up against in terms of what these rules are going to be like in terms of number of attendants, responsibility of policing these rules amongst themselves, responsibility of having someone at the front door to check temperatures, most people are going to say, pass. But there will be some that might want to go forward, and I think they ought to have the right to make that decision for themselves.
Any other comments? Okay, we do have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor of the motion?
Could you restate the motion, please?
Could you clarify it, Mayor?
Yeah, but can we, or was the motion, Councilmember, for every facility that was closed on March 16th? Or do you want us to name them?
The motion was to not open those that were left to be open as per the ordinance that we voted on at that time.
For the 31st?
Yes.
Okay. So do y'all want to clarify what those are?
Yes.
Okay. Who has a list of that? Okay.
So right now, the facilities that are closed at this time are the Civic Center, the Event Center, the Julie Rogers Theater, the Jefferson Theater, the Lakeside Center, the Sterling Pruitt Center, and our community centers.
Okay. So is your motion also, okay, so, never mind. I got it.
So my motion would be for those facilities to remain closed.
That were just named.
That would just name.
And just to clarify one thing, voting no opens them up July 31st, correct?
That's correct.
That would be correct, yes.
When it's closed till July 31st, we have another meeting between now and the 31st, do we not?
We're planning to.
Okay. Can we evaluate it again next week? I mean, it's. I
You
mean,
could, but I don't think you'd want to do that because you have on this list,
Yeah.
you know, they're going to open up. We have events scheduled for
On the
August the
1st.
1st. So that does not give
Give
much
them any
time at all.
to plan if they do choose to go forward. If we're going to reevaluate it, well, I don't think we need to reevaluate it if the vote is to open them. Now, if the
Okay.
vote is to close them, to keep them closed, I should say,
Yeah.
then I think that we should probably talk about reevaluating it at some time. Okay? So the motion is to keep them closed, remain closed, the ones that were just named. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed for the motion, say no.
No.
Councilmember Pate?
No, no.
Okay. Yeah, show of hands, please. Aye? No? The noes have it. The events facility's open. Good luck, Emily. All right. We have a public hearing next, if you'd like to take us into that, please.
Yes, ma'am. I'll read the public hearing, and then Patrick Wilshire with Public Management is going to come forward and lead you through a presentation. And then after he's finished, Mayor, and the council has an opportunity to ask questions, then you'd open the public hearing. But for the benefit of the public hearing is titled, Receive Comments Related to the Community Development Block Grant Mitigation Program and the Submission of an Application to the General Land Office for a Texas Community Development Block Grant Mitigation Grant. And Patrick Wilshire is here now.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mayor, Council, good afternoon. My name is Patrick Wiltshire. We met last week briefly. We've, just to recap who I am and why I'm here today, is I'm with Public Management. We're the grant consulting firm that's been hired by the City of Beaumont to develop and submit a CDBG mitigation application to the Texas General Land Office. So we touched on that just briefly last week in the discussion about a water treatment plant. Today's public hearing, and I'm going to go over several items today. The notice had an agenda of 9 items. And so I'm going to go through all of those items, and I have slides to kind of walk us through all of that. Item 9 really is a sort of a public comment Q&A that we can go through to touch on these. The reason why we're holding the public hearing is really to ensure that we've addressed all of the requirements as set out by the Texas General Land Office to submit this application. And so the first slide is, in the first item of this public hearing, is to address citizen participation. And because these are federal funds and because they're passed through to the state of Texas, there's a variety of requirements that we must meet. Now, the federal agency that is funding this program is the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And they, sort of are the umbrella of community development block grant funding. They have certain processes in place to ensure that whatever projects or applications are developed on behalf of a jurisdiction have gone through some level of public comment, public consideration. And so there are a couple phases that we will go through. You'll see me again eventually to walk us through this application. And this is what we call phase 1 of the application of the citizen participation process, which is to have a public hearing. The purpose of this is to receive comment And so there was a notice that went out into the paper. There was an address to mail comments to from the public about potential projects or considerations that ought to be made for an application to be submitted. And then, eventually we will want to kind of document those comments if there are any, as well as those from the governing body today, to incorporate what impacts need to be addressed as it relates to long-term disaster recovery activities, which is really what this program is all about. So consider this as phase one of a multi-phase citizen participation plan. There will be another phase towards the end where we would put what we call a substantially complete application back out for public comment through a publication and through a posting for at least 14 days. So this won't be the only time to have comment. Certainly as a governing body, you'll have another opportunity after that, because after that, we will have to take that application after all of those comments have been made and addressed and bring that back to you so that you can officially authorize that submission of the application. So we call this phase one of the Citizen Participation Plan. Item 2 of the posted agenda was the development of local housing and community development or long-term recovery guidelines. And so, the city of Beaumont is a recipient of CDBG funds annually, directly from HUD. Chris Boone has been managing this for the city, and so you have a version of local housing guidelines, and you operate your program sort of within this HUD mandated requirement. That still applies to this, to this funding opportunity. And so, our main objective here is really to focus on projects that will ultimately enhance infrastructure. And so, again, what we're talking about is long-term recovery type projects that will enhance existing infrastructure. We want to develop a program that ultimately will protect life and property, and create a program that will ultimately be funded and that will be viewed favorably by the Texas General Land Office. And then when it is viewed and monitored by either the state or the federal level, that we have addressed all of these concerns. And so there's just a brief chart on here, which we're pulling directly from the General Land Office's action plan and their application guide, which details how we need to consider mitigation activities. So item 3 is amount of CDBG mitigation funds available. Now, a couple of things to note on here, and I want to walk through a few things, and I have a continuation slide on here, what that means to the city of Beaumont. There is $4.29 billion that's been allocated to the state of Texas for CDBG mitigation activities. This was approved, finalized in 2019 through the Federal Register, and there are, as you can see in this table, there are a variety of programs that have resources allocated to them. Really, for the city of Beaumont, your sort of row to factor in on is really 2, but one is most important right now, and that's the Hurricane Harvey State Mitigation Competition, and the one that immediately follows that, which is entitled Regional Mitigation Program. So it is the lion's share, really, of the allocation. The rest of these programs, there are some other competitions. Unfortunately, Jefferson County is not identified, because they are identified at the county level for eligibility in the disaster events of 2015 and 2016. And so the city, being in Jefferson County, is eligible for the Hurricane Harvey State Mitigation Competition, which has effectively been broke up into 2 batches. So there's $2.1 billion that has been allocated to this particular competition. Right now, they have opened $1 billion, so half of that funds is open now for an application to be submitted on October 28th of this year. The other half of that will be released sometime late this year, maybe early next year. And then there's this regional mitigation program that's defined there, which is also eligible to the city and to this county and the disaster impacted regions from Harvey, which will be similar to what you've seen in the past, where you'll see a method of distribution potentially that's allocated through the COG, through the Southeast Texas Planning Commission, but that won't be done until late this year, early next year. So you have a couple opportunities for funding Presently, there's $1 billion that's allocated to the city of, within this disaster-impacted region, which includes Beaumont. And so what is that? So what is that $1 billion of the first round of competition? What does that mean? Who all is eligible? What does that look like for the city of Beaumont? So this map is a representation of the 49 impacted counties and 10 zip codes that have been designated by, and sorry if the map is small, I was trying to fit them all onto the slide, that have been designated by HUD in the state of Texas. These regions are eligible for participation in these competitions and ultimately, eventually, the regional program. The tan-colored counties are defined as what we refer to as HUD most impacted, and that is a very important concept to know. So there's two designations. One is a HUD most impacted county or region, and the other is a state most impacted county or region. And it's important to understand the distinction because while there's 49 counties and 10 zip codes, 50% of the money has to be spent in HUD most impacted and distressed, and up to 50% can be spent in the state most impacted and distressed. Now, we find the use of words to be really intriguing there, because in the action plan it says at least and up to. So you are one of 19 HUD most impacted regions that will compete for this, right now, the current round of just over $1 billion. If we look at that, then they're trying to split that up as 50% and 50%, or 500 million plus will go to HUD most impacted, and 500 million plus will go to state most impacted. Ultimately, this is a competition. So the wording there, again, is intriguing for us because we believe that it's going to be whoever scores the best is going to get funded. We believe it's going to be a fierce competition. Now, what you see is 49 counties and 10 zip codes that are specifically identified. One unique element to CDBG that we've never seen happen, and we don't know if it's going to happen again, is that for this round only, and if I go back to this slide, you see there's a couple of the competitions for 15, 16. For this round only, for Hurricane Harvey state mitigation competition, they've allowed entities that are not units of local government, so cities and counties. Other entities that are not cities and counties may submit an application. And so if we look at this map, you're talking about hundreds of potential applications to go. So it's going to be a very competitive process. Scoring is going to be quite critical, but it is a great opportunity for the city of Beaumont to consider your application. You have a minimum maximum application criteria to adhere to. The minimum application to be submitted is $3 million up to $100 million. And we talked a little bit about that last week, but those are the ranges that you can submit within. And there's a host of scoring criteria that will impact that application that need to be worked through going from today and moving forward. So the explanation of eligible CDBG mitigation activities. So, there's two, sort of lengthy definitions on this slide, and these are really two definitions that are given to us that we have to adhere to. And the first one, and I'll just read that briefly, is HUD's definition of mitigation. Before I read this, I want to make sure that we make clear that mitigation is not a word that the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, defines. It is a FEMA term. FEMA defines mitigation and do that often, but HUD has not. So this, while it seems relatively straightforward and simple of a definition, it took HUD nearly 2 years to create this definition. And so what that is those activities that increase resilience to disaster and reduce or eliminate the long-term risk of loss of life, injury, damage, and loss of property and suffering and hardship by lessening impact of future disasters. Now, we will have to define a project that will adhere to that definition, and there's another definition down here that GLO has developed to, for us to identify a project also against. And so this is no small task for this fund. It's unique in the fact that it's the first time that HUD has developed a program with a different definition for long-term recovery other than disaster recovery. We are tying a few different terms here with long-term recovery. However, our final project has to adhere to that definition by HUD of what mitigation is. And then the project definition, and I'm not going to read through all that in detail here, but ultimately the project has to mitigate or has to lessen or has to alleviate in some fashion some natural disaster. And so that project has to be within a defined geographic area. There are certain parameters we have to use to identify that, but we have to create a project that mitigates a disaster. We have to create a project that can do that within a certain geographic area, and then we can submit that application. So the use of past disaster recovery funds, and the city of Beaumont has received a good amount of money in the last decade and a half or so. There's a couple of pictures. We're very proud of these pictures. So our firm helped administer previous programs for the city of Beaumont. You may recognize some of these sites. Some of them are rather obscure. A real interesting one, if I may, is this picture where you see the contractors down there in that hole. That was actually in South Park when we discovered Exxon's 70-inch water line. And so this was a quite unique picture. And in fact, when I took that picture, we met on site with Exxon's representative, and the first thing that they said when we got there was, "Thank you for finding our water line," because they didn't know where it was. So it's, we've had exciting projects. Well over $70 million has been allocated to the city of Beaumont over the last 15 plus years. Maybe prior to 2006, but we've worked with the city since 2006 and then up until now. So you have done some great projects. You have some great projects on the docket with what we call your first round of Harvey that you are still waiting funding on. And then now with this new opportunity that you've got where there's significant funding available to you to do long-term recovery. So this next item is the amount of funds that are available to benefit low to moderate income persons. And LMI is the acronym for that, and it's tossed around a lot. You may, folks that, like me, that come around, we use LMI as if we're breathing, right? So that's the terminology that we use often. And it's, something that we have to use in a way that can justify and identify projects for funding. And so because the federal agency is the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and because CDBG is this federal program, they've identified at least 3 national objectives. One of those, and their main national objective at the federal level, is to principally benefit low to moderate income persons. This program has identified that as their primary national objective, which is how you justify funding, as well as another one which is referred to as urgent need mitigation. The competitions are heavily weighted to favor LMI projects. So and I may have mentioned this last time with a question of scoring, but if I didn't, so there's 105 points that are allocated for this state competition. 20 of those points, or approximately 20% of those points, is if you're doing an LMI project or not. And that's very critical because, that's a lot of points. There's a lot of other factors that you don't have much control over, and you've got to be able to develop something that scores the best. And so this map, we've put this map together, and we've been working with this map with staff. This is familiar for you. So this is your CCN, the City of Beaumont. Those those green shaded areas are block groups which meet the federal criteria for low to moderate income. And so, and again, I know that they're small, but so we've been using this to develop the potential for a project that could ultimately qualify the entire CCN to do a project. So we're working through all of that, but because there's such a heavy weighted focus on the LMI component for competitions is we really have to really kind of figure out where that may be and what activity will, benefit these regions. So item 7 was minimizing the displacement of persons by project activities, and that really goes without saying for us and for staff is that, an eligible activity could be, buyout and acquisition, and you guys do have an allocation for that currently that you're working through for your round 1. That really is not the intent. Our intent is not to remove people from their homes. Really, our intent is to protect the people that are in their homes with, enhanced infrastructure or better services. And so that's what staff and myself and the team will be doing, is to try to identify those projects that will minimize this as the primary objective, is that we don't want to take people out of their homes. We want to lessen these burdens of natural disasters, and hopefully that project that's submitted achieves that. Item 8, so I took this a little bit further, and this is really a discussion, and this is the last item before I can address your questions, although you could have asked me questions if you wanted to, is the discussion of the application process. And I've taken this a little bit further along than just telling you what's going to happen up to the application. I kind of took it further to say, well, what does this really look like long term for the city if you submit an application? And so we know that right now, if nothing else changes, that you'll have to submit an application by October 28th of this year. Now, from here, just the process for the application is, as I mentioned at the onset, this is sort of phase 1 of citizen participation plan. We're going to go from here, and we're going to work with staff, and we're going to develop an application, an actual project to bring back to you. That'll take 1-2 months or so. We have to put that project back out for comment. We have to address those comments. We have to bring that application back to you, and we have to pass that through what we call application resolution, your official authorization to submit this. We would submit on or before October 28th. But from there, what does it look like? So what does the road look like for you from there? Well, it's going to take GLO because, as I mentioned a moment ago, this is going to be highly competitive, and so there are going to be a lot of applications. So we're looking at, minimum really, 2 to 4 months of a GLO application review. From there, if we're, scored well or scored high enough, they will, ask for additional clarification on the application, or a request for information, an RFI will go out. We would address those. We would work through that process. That may take 1-2 months. The application gets approved. That's going to take time for the approval process to go through at the General Land Office. Ultimately, that application has to make its way to contracts. That's going to take a significant amount of time. And so, our best, with my experience, our best guess of a contract, if you're funded from an application submitted in October of this year, won't come until 12 to 14 months from then. So October, December of next year. There is no telling if that's going to be fast tracked. Now, GLO will tell you that they're going to get them in and out as fast as they can, and certainly I'm sure that they will try. But, our experience is going to tell us that we're in from the submission of this application to potentially seeing a contract, Mayor, for you to sign, is 12, 14 months away. And so, even from there, you're 1-2 years out from being able to do any work. So I want to make sure that we're clear on timelines, and how, this isn't an immediate recovery. The goal would be to identify the project and build out all of those schedule implications that will delay that project now with the application, because this may be ultimately a 5, 6, 7, 8 year project depending on what's submitted. And so we want to manage expectations on how soon can you do something, how soon will you hear something. And so this is sort of our best shot at sort of building that out for you now. And then certainly if anything changes, we want to be engaged with staff to ensure that we provide you the updates that you need to have. So I'll take questions from.
Thank you so much. That was great. Good to hear too.
Good.
Anybody have questions? Really? Okay.
No,
Go ahead,
we
Councilman.
take turns.
Go ahead, Councilman Getz.
Okay, so this money's available, and are we looking at anything other than the water plant, or is that the primary project that we're looking at funding for this?
I don't want to speak out of turn, but I know that, we're considering drainage activities as well.
Drainage activities as well?
Yes, sir. Mhm.
Can you elaborate at all without speaking out of turn? I mean, because that's a real concern, obviously.
No,
for
staff is working on additional drainage projects to bring to you for consideration, as well as they've been meeting with Drainage District 6 on joint participation projects. But we're not ready to disclose any details at this time because we're working through the who, what, when, where, and why.
Fair enough. Do you have a timetable that you think that you might be coming back?
We'll definitely do it before October the 28th.
All right.
Councilman Pate?
So basically, we've got a two-pronged attack on the drainage, working with these distinguished individuals as well as DD6 and the city. So it might, and I think this is important for our citizens, we're going everywhere we can to get funds to enhance the drainage and eliminate some of the problems we've had in the past, both with you and Bart and our friends out at DD6, all in conjunction, because if we can get those funds from this bundle of cash, there's also additional funds that we will go out and talk about that the city would take on personally. So when you leave here, we want all the citizens to know we're going full speed to do anything we can as far as it relates to the drainage issue that we face when we have Harvey and Ike and Rita, Imelda, and there'll be another one, because it is a big priority for all of us up here.
So just to, if I may, and what I've told staff, and certainly what I, want to make known here is that my primary objective is to get funding here. And so whatever that project is, well, that's why you hired me, right? So my primary objective is to identify the best application. Now, I didn't touch on this, and I think we touched on this last meeting, but technically, the city can submit 3 local applications and partner on 3 regional applications. And, submitting 6 applications, forgive my expression, is a bit of a pipe dream on that. So what we're really looking at is what are our best applications? What are they? We've identified at least one. I've got a relationship with DD6. I know who their grant administrator is that they've hired there as well. We play well in the sandbox together, okay? So whatever the projects are that are going to be most beneficial to the city of Beaumont, I can assure you that we're going to do the best that we can to submit them in a manner that is as favorable to your residents as possible.
So with that said, basically, we want to go with the projects that might not be what everyone up here thinks is the best. It's what we think we can win with to get, because it's a competition, as you said.
Yeah, it's a competition.
And you have to look at all those different areas that they look at to make sure we score the highest to get the money.
So and ultimately it will be your call, right, as a governing body. So we will bring back to you eventually the application for consideration.
But you're going to tell us what,
yes.
which ones you think would score the highest.
We're gonna full disclosure you on which ones are your best shot.
And so that's what you're going to be working over the next few months.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think I know where Councilman Pate was going with this. We hear a lot about what we're doing or what we're not doing, and there's a lot going on regarding not just our drainage right now and our water treatment plants and the different things that we're looking at, and in every aspect of our infrastructure. We're an old city, 1838, and there's a lot of things that need to be done, but they all cost money. And any time we can get funding like this, I mean, it is so much needed, and we appreciate your expertise.
Yes, ma'am.
One question there.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm assuming that you're fee-based for your services.
Yes.
Can we talk about that? How's this?
Yeah, sure. So we have a contract with the city. We've been hired to write the application and to manage a project if it's awarded. So our fee for writing the application is $0. We don't charge for that, but we bill our fee against whatever the awarded contract is, right? So our fee is percentage based on the final award amount. And that's how we will be paid to the grant. So no local funds will be used to pay public management, they'll be paid out of the grant. If it's funded.
Yeah. You don't get paid if you don't get funded.
That's right.
Kind of like commission.
Like you want funding.
Well, yeah, I think it's I think all parties win. I think that's fair.
Very good. Any other questions, Mr.? Okay. Thank you. Very thorough. Appreciate it. And so this is a public hearing, correct? So everything's been done that I need to, I just need to open it, okay? All right, so we've just heard the information in front of us, and now I will open up the floor for any citizen who wishes to speak during this public hearing. This is what we just talked about. I will open up the microphone at the end of the meeting for general comments, but I will now open up the microphone for public hearing. Do we know if there's anyone?
We don't have any at this
Okay.
time.
All right. Officer Riley, we've asked, right, for the public hearing? Yes? I don't know who's doing that. Okay. Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So there's no one. I'll close the floor. This is not an action item, so we'll move on to our work session.
Mayor and council, the work session is to review and discuss the city's general obligation bonds, certificates of obligation, revenue bonds, other debt issues, primarily possible refunding opportunities. And Dusty Traylor, who is our financial advisor, is here to walk you through some proposed refundings.
Hi, how are you? Nice to see you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be with you. Again, for the record, my name is Dusty Traylor, Managing Director with RBC Capital Markets. We have the honor and privilege of serving the city of Beaumont as your financial advisor. As Kyle said, the presentation before you discusses, I know that the city is in discussions in preparation for the issuance of utility system revenue bonds in the amount of approximately $25 million to finance various improvements in the waterworks and sewer system here of the city. As part of our role as financial advisor, we're continually evaluating the city's bond portfolio, both those bonds that are solely secured by utility system revenues, as well as the bonds that are secured by GO or ad valorem taxes. And as part of this process, as the city is moving forward with the issuance of $25 million of new money, we think it would be prudent to consider refinancing portions of the city's existing debt. Interest rates at this time are at or near the all-time lows for municipal bonds, so it's a very attractive interest rate environment that we're in. The presentation material that I placed before you has several pages and a few sections in it. I'm going to concentrate my comments this afternoon really just on the executive summary, which is found inside the front cover page. And so starting out, talking about the waterworks and sewer system is kind of the first item for our discussion here. We believe that there are two refinancing opportunities that we ought to look at here for the city. The first being in combination, a series that would be one series in combination with your $25 million of new money. This would add on the refinancing of the Series 2010 BABs. Back in 2010, the city issued some Build America bonds. Those are bonds that have been subsidized. Annually, the debt service has been subsidized. But actually, by refinancing those now, we could realize a savings, the city could realize a savings of approximately $3.095 million over the remaining life of those bonds. Those bonds, when they were issued at a rate of about 6%. So we'd be looking at significant savings there. The other portion of that transaction that we think is important to consider is those bonds have a reserve fund that is set aside that the city does not have access to until those bonds mature. By refinancing those now, we would also be able to free up the reserve fund that's allocated for those bonds, and that reserve fund is in the amount of $2.39 million. So combined, we'd be looking at a benefit of about almost $5.5 million for just that one refinancing. Then the other refinancing to look at is another portion of the city's existing debt on the utility side, the Series 2012s. And by refinancing those bonds also have this reserve fund that the city does not currently have access to because of old bond covenants. We would be able to free up approximately $1.45 million that's set aside in that reserve fund at this time. Then moving forward, that's the information on the utility system. On the GO side, we've got two refinancing opportunities here to discuss. The city's Series 2011 bonds, currently in the amount of $31.985 million, are coming up on their call date. And by refinancing those now, we're seeing a net present value savings of approximately $8.57 million. Those old bonds are outstanding at a rate of 4.98%. In the current interest rate environment, we think we'd be able to cut that interest rate in half. And then the other piece would be to also refinance about $79.1 million of the Series 2012 and Series 2013 bonds. These bonds would have to be an advance refunding, and because of current federal tax law, that refunding would have to be done using taxable bonds. But that is a very common thing that's being done right now in the municipal space. And because rates are so low, there is very little, if any, real penalty there to going ahead and using a taxable instrument to do that. And right now, we believe that the net present value savings to refinance those bonds would be about $11.69 million. So on the GO side, we're looking at potential net present value savings of a little over $20 million. Works out to annual cash flow savings on the GO side of about $1.2 million per year. So looking at both utility system and GO side, there are some real opportunities here to move forward that could garner some significant savings and additional flexibility for the folks here in Beaumont.
Good. Thank you. Do y'all have any questions for Mr. Traylor? Councilman Pate?
Yes, sir.
I think it's important for everybody to know that when you guys were working with us before, these were great rates.
Yes.
But because things now are pretty close to zero with the Fed, we're in a position to take advantage of spectacular rates.
That's right.
Because those back in 2012 were really good.
Absolutely.
I knew we all know what everybody else was paying, and this is a direct reflection on not just you, but Kyle and the team that we have here, that our rating is so good that we could get those rates. Because there's a whole lot of cities, a whole lot bigger than Beaumont, that paid much, much higher prices to finance whatever issues they had. So I want to tell you, we appreciate you, and have over the years. We just, in an opportunity to try to clarify this with the average person that's just watching today, this is how it happened. And when we were doing it then, it was a great deal. Now it's even better.
Well, I would echo your remarks, and thank you for your remarks, but I would echo your remarks as it relates to the professionalism with which your staff operates. But I think it goes also to this council. Council takes deliberate action to look at this sort of stuff, and it's also a positive reflection on the council to be able to take advantage of these low interest rates. So we obviously appreciate the opportunity to work with you guys.
Thanks so much. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Appreciate
All right.
it.
Thank y'all.
Great job.
Great to see everybody.
Lots more.
Try to save us some more money.
Will do.
Okay, that concludes our work session, so I will move, but before I do, not forget, At the close of the city council meeting, the council will hold an executive session to consider matters related to contemplated or pending litigation in accordance with Section 551.071 of the Government Code, claim of Bertha Jackson. Now would be the time for any citizen who wishes to speak. If you would like to make public comment today on any item, now's the time to do so. And if you haven't already done so, please fill out the green slip and hand it to the officer. She will bring it in here, and we'll call out your name. As I mentioned earlier, we'd appreciate if you keep your comments to 3 minutes. The green light will come on when you approach the podium, and the red light will come on when your time is up.
Louis Vaughn, 9615 Mapes, Beaumont, Texas.
Good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
I guess Louis Vaughn, 9615 Mapes, Beaumont, Texas. Several items, well, at least 2 items I'm going to speak to today. The prisons in Southeast Texas has the highest COVID-19 infection individuals in all of the prisons systems in Texas. Why? The difference is that in Southeast Texas, we have refineries, petrochemical industry. It is said that we will produce more oil in Southeast Texas than they do even in Saudi. That means more refineries or larger refineries. Therefore, what we deal with here is pollution plus COVID-19. When we look at our atmosphere, all of these come from the industry. The prisons are well constructed, but have poor ventilation or a poor ventilation system. Therefore, more COVID cases will increase in the prisons as well as the officers that work there who live in this city and other places in the Golden Triangle. And they will become infected. The schools in Southeast Texas and Texas in general have issues of the same, poor ventilation when dealing with COVID-19. So now, here in Southeast Texas, we have COVID-19 and pollution from the refineries. I've said this for years. We live in a war zone. I've talked with doctors at MD Anderson, and they say the most wicked cancer comes from this area. Question, what is the solution? The solution is simple. Well, not really simple. But we need a system that removes carbon dioxide and other pollutants from these buildings. Then we need another system that will kill the bacteria in these areas. Is there such a system or systems? The answer is yes, there is. I cannot overemphasize, just 1 minute please, ma'am.
Yes, sir, if you'll please bring it to a close.
I cannot overemphasize the use of masks, the social distancing, hand washing, and all of the others. But above everything, I have one other suggestion. That we need to be praying. Prayer is the key We need to pray unceasingly. We need to be looking to the author and the finisher of our faith. He can, and he will turn it around if we turn to him. But if we don't, you haven't seen nothing yet.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. We appreciate your comments.
Ricky Jason, 1075 Magnolia Street, Beaumont, Texas.
Yes, sir.
Hi,
Hello.
I'm community activist Ricky Jason, and I am the protege of the late Dick Gregory. First of all, we made a very bad mistake today. Who voted to reopen the civic centers is a disaster. I come here today to speak to the mayor, Ms. Becky Ames, and the city council, and I ask you all again to please do not reopen. Please do not reopen our schools. If you do, our kids are gonna die. Don't listen to the president. Don't listen to the governor. It's not a game. It's not a game. His name is not Frank, and it's sure not Dick. I have words for you, Satan. You makes the whole community sick. This man is a legend and an icon. Mr. Attorney Tyrone Cooper. He deserves respect. Satan, I ask you to come and step down in front of him and tell him you sorry. Also, the racist statues the council voted to take down, the citizens and the community don't want to pay a penny to storage hatred and evil. Take those racist statues to the city dump yard and bury them 500 feet under the ground so our ancestors can rest in peace. Satan, you are evil, wicked, Adolf Hitler, supremacist, and Klansman. Black people don't get no respect from the local news. People, you don't have to watch it. Black business owners, you don't have to advertise here. Our black kings and queens are being used like puppets. And I say this to myself, a lot of people are gonna die for the board members that made this agreement. And I appreciate Mr. Alderman Samuels for being on the front line. And I appreciate this lady right here for being on the front line. A lot of people gonna die, and Satan, you the part of it. Mike Getz, get off the
Thank
board.
you, sir.
Objection.
Thank you, Thank you, sir.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, there's no other citizen who wishes to speak. If not, I'll move to council member comments, and I will start with you, council member Mouton, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no comments today.
Thank you. Council member Samuel?
I have no comment.
Council member Pate?
No comment.
Mayor Pro Tem Belshaw?
No comment.
Council member Getz?
There will be a virtual Dallin West Zoom meeting tonight. Hopefully that'll be the last one for a while, and we can meet in person at the Rogers Park Community Center next month. The number of complaints I have received in the past week concerning citizens with discolored water is alarming. It's something that I'm glad we're going to be addressing. The city manager has agreed to meet with myself and another council member, and we're going to talk about that and hopefully have a work session on causes of the discoloration and what can be done about it. It's been going on for a number of months, and it's certainly not a normal condition, and we would like to try to get answers for our citizens. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Neal,
No comment, Mayor, thank you.
have anything? Did you have something? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, a few council members did ask if I'd comment about the discolored water, and I don't want to get in a back and forth. This is normal, and I'll tell you why. This is something that we deal with. I had discolored water, for whatever it's worth, at my house last week. The mayor had at her house. It's usually during very dry conditions, in excess of 90 degrees. You have more breaks than usual. During very cold conditions, freezing weather, you have more breaks citywide. So last week we did have more calls than usual and emails to the council as it relates to the discolored water. And that's all attributable to the number of breaks in our system. So last week, maybe it was Wednesday, we had a number of breaks that day, and in particular around the area of 10th and McFadden, you had a large break, which, depending on the size of the line, whether it's on a main line or close to a main line, and water starts moving in different directions because of the sediment in the lines that are stirred up, that causes the discoloration. This is something that cities across the country deal with to certain degrees. All cities deal with this, but the city of Beaumont, I can tell you, for those of us that have been here, staff, we've always dealt with this, so it is normal. Many days and weeks are different than others, but our staff does a very good job in very difficult conditions of repairing these lines in a timely manner, even if it includes going all night. And so they do an excellent job. They're out when the public sees fire hydrants that are open. That means they're flushing the lines to try to clear the water. And I know it can be disconcerting to the public. It is for all of us. When you see brown water filling up your bathtub, we get it. We understand. It is safe to bathe in. Our water is tested every day, throughout the day, 365 days a year. Again, we don't like seeing the brown water coming out of the tap. We understand. But last week, while it is normal, meaning it doesn't happen every day, it happens when you have a lot of breaks. And we had a lot of breaks last week, and that's something we cannot control. That's something that is going to continue forever. And you can call around to your colleagues in other cities, they deal with it as well. So I don't want the public they have every right to call us. We want to know the areas of town that are having the discolored water. We go out and check and start flushing lines in those areas, and our staff does a really good job of doing that. So yes, we want to hear from the citizens that are having these issues. But just know, in full transparency, the problem that we face is not unique to us, and it's not going away. We might have 5, 10 breaks tomorrow. You don't know. When it rains, it helps, but if it gets up 95, 100 degrees for a number of days in a row or a week without rain, you're going to have more breaks. So just wanted, again, I think 3 of you, or 2 for sure, mentioned, would you please say something today? And I am going to meet with 2 council members on Thursday with key staff. They've asked for that. I don't think a work session's warranted. There's not anything else we can say that I haven't just went through with you. But we'll, if 2 council members requested according to your policies, we'll do it. So.
Okay. All right. Yes, sorry. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mayor, I did fail to bring up two comments. One, we'd like to get an update on where Carlisle Street is on the street rehab program. That's the street that runs between the two BISD facilities off of Concord Road. I need to find out. That was questioned as to where it is on the rehabilitation. And I think all council members received an email from the Cartwright Neighborhood Association on behalf of the concerned citizens of Cartwright Addition Neighborhood Association. They've observed and noted various forms of illegal activities and criminal behavior, including but not limited to prostitution, trafficking of narcotics, and various controlled substances in and around the above-mentioned property. That conduct has generated various emotions throughout the neighborhood, such as terror, fear, distress, and anxiety. There are 13 known drug distribution houses, aka crack houses, in the Cartwright Addition in the city of Beaumont. That Cartwright Addition is a trapeze shaped area that is approximately 1 mile long from College Street to Washington Boulevard in the north and southerly direction, and approximately 1/2 mile in a west to easterly direction from 4th Street to the railroad tracks. It gives a list of addresses in which there are suspected drug trafficking, and there's an average of 1 crack house for every 5 blocks. And they're asking for assistance and help. And that is an email that was sent to the city of Beaumont, all council members, the sheriff, the chief of police, as well as the district attorney's office and the U.S. agencies that should be involved. And they're asking that they get relief. And I told them I would ensure that everyone did receive that.
Thank you, Councilmember. Did you have anything, City Attorney? Okay. All right, I do have a few things to talk about today. First, just a question, and I know we're not doing a report, but on the brown water, is that dirt?
It's just sediment, minerals. We have a lot of manganese in our water, in particular.
So it wouldn't be just dirt.
No, it's just sediment, iron, minerals. Look, the soil's different in different parts of Beaumont. You know, Beaumont's, let's say, 80 to 85 square miles. You can go out there. I'd even tell the public, ride out to the Cinemark Theater out there on I-10, which is closed because of the pandemic. Ride out there and just drive through the parking lot and look at the failures. Because people that have gone to the movie in the last year, a lot of those failures weren't there. Meaning the soil conditions, if you had new water lines everywhere in the city of Beaumont, which isn't possible in any city in America or the world, but let's say you did. Let's say that you had hundreds and hundreds of miles of new water lines in the ground. That is not going, you're still going to have breaks. You are. So go drive through that parking lot, look at the failures. I'm talking from here to the podium. I was out there within the last 4 or 5 days. Now that's all private property, but the conditions out there, Willow Creek, there's a lot of parts of the city where there's more changes in the soil conditions than other areas of the city. That's just an example of if you had new lines, buried, you're still going to have these problems as the ground shifts and pipe shifts and you have these breaks. It's not that the city's done anything wrong, or other cities for that matter. You could have, again, brand new infrastructure in a city that's 30 years old. That's not the point. The point is, depends on soil conditions, weather conditions. You're going to have breaks. A lot of times the public doesn't even see it. They drive by, we're fixing it, and the water's still clear. Sometimes, depending again, case by case, depending on the size of the line and how many lines are affected, how many lines we have to isolate, you're going to have discolored water. So
I just wanted to clarify.
I don't
that it
want the
wasn't
public
dirt,
to be
'cause somebody called it
scared
dirt,
that,
and I thought,
you
I
know,
don't think
that
it's dirt.
Scared.
Okay.
What's changed too, what's changed dramatically over the last, compared to 30 years ago, 20 years ago, is social media. We all know. People talk more about it, misinformation, some good information, but a lot of misinformation. And people start sharing it, and I just want accurate information out there. The truth of the matter is, all cities have breaks. How many of you have gone up to the country and stayed in a hotel an hour from here and you see the discoloration, you know, in their water? Some water's harder than others. Depends on where you get it, whether it's well water, whether it's surface water. So there's a lot at play here, but that's why we're staffed every day. We have people on call every night because we have breaks. We're going to continue to have breaks. And most of the time, again, you don't see it. Sometimes you do. And when you do, it's because you've had a number of breaks at one time, usually. Or you're going to have, say, the discolored water in a certain area around that break. What happened last week, we had a number of breaks, and it affected the areas throughout the entire city of Beaumont.
Thank you for that. Okay, so one thing that I did want to talk about is, as always, we do have tomorrow and Thursday exercises going on in emergency management, and if you've registered your cell phone with Stan, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, you could get a call, and that is testing for it. But if you haven't registered, that call is saying, tell your family and friends, register. You register your cell phone, and when you do that, you can receive emergency alerts such as critical weather information, shelter-in-place orders, anything that would be any type of emergency within the city of Beaumont. There is a phone number, I don't have it in front of me, but if you go to STAN, stands for Southeast Texas Alert Network, and if you go to www.stan.com, you can register your cell phone and get those alerts. But there will be a series of calls coming out over the next 2 days, tomorrow and Thursday, asking people to do that, and if you've already done it, you may get a call too. So please be aware of that, and that is emergency alert exercise. We do different exercises throughout the year for different emergencies. We had never done one for a pandemic, but I think we're doing, no one had, but you know, we're working on hurricane season right now. You know, anything that could happen, a spill on the freeway, whatever it might be, if there's a danger or there's an emergency, you want to know about that on your cell phone, I would think. So please register your cell phones. In addition, last week I talked about the National Guard Mobile Testing Unit, which is the group that has been in our city on and off over the last few weeks doing COVID-19 testing. They're walk-ups, and they're from 8 to 4. Alice Keith Park was today. I haven't gotten numbers from that yet. Rogers Park is actually tomorrow. I'm sorry, not tomorrow. Thursday, the 23rd. Central Park is Friday the 24th, and Sterling Pruitt is the 28th, Tuesday. And I just got notification that there will be Monday through Friday of next week. Cristo Rey will have one Monday through Friday of next week. As I said, you do not have to register for those. They're put on by the National Guard Mobile Testing Unit. They're from 8 to 4. Sometimes they close a little earlier than 4 if they get to their number. But those are on our website and on our Facebook page, both on the emergency management. Please like the City of Beaumont Emergency Management page. That's a new page that will give, so we can take some of the emergency management information off of the police department page because we had too much on police. We're going to put it on emergency management, and that'll also be on the government page. But all this information will be on there along with the phone number for Stan. We're going to do it in separate areas so all the calls don't come in at once because it does come through our 311 system. So y'all might remember, those of you that were on council in like 2007, 2008, we developed the customer service hotline, which was 311. And now we are using that in addition to a customer service hotline for emergency management, both to register people with Stan, but also when we have, like we had Harvey or Imelda, to use for non-emergent calls, so everyone's not using 911 if it's not emergent. So just an FYI on that. I already said, but today, yesterday we had 87 new cases. They continue to go up, and I'm going to say it one more time because I like to say it every week because I know everybody doesn't always watch. But the yellow graph is when the people were tested, not exactly when they came back, because different places take different amounts of time. So when you look at this, it's low and then it goes up like this. That's when the people were tested, because that's what the health department keeps up with, because after 14 days, they do call to check on to see if they're recovered. We're seeing that standardly it's about 14 days, but some can go up to 21 or 30 depending on their health conditions. And again, I also want to say that if you have recovered, please consider giving your plasma to the blood bank, or to call and just let your doctor know or something. It's not like it's not like when you give blood, it's much easier than that. And they're in desperate need of that to help some of these people get off these ventilators, or hopefully never get on the ventilators. In addition, census is still going on. I can't say how important that is to our city, as far as funding, whether it be housing, just a myriad of things that we do at the city. So if you haven't already gone online or called, just go to the U.S. Census Bureau and look up all the information. You can fill it out online. I don't remember the exact date, but after, I think about maybe in the next 2 to 3 weeks, they will start going door to door. We are about 56% right now, we think, in the city as far as who's filled it out. So we need to be higher than that. And last year, the last time we did the census at this time, we were probably in the 60s, the low 60, 64%. So we're a little bit behind, probably due to COVID, but it's been extended. So please, if you haven't done it, it will not hurt you on benefits. It will not hurt you on anything that you do. This will help our citizens and some of the things even that we talked about today for funding sources. So with that said, I believe I read the executive session. I think that's all I had. And we appreciate those of you who watched and those of you who came. We will now recess into executive session.